Everybody, it's Michelle from Farrell Coaching and from Straight Up Strong, and today I wanted to address a common discomfort that comes up for a lot of folks, especially women over 40, who have been not strength training either their entire life or have taken a break from it for whatever reason. And this discomfort is in the knees when we are squatting. And we might notice this pain or discomfort when we're doing everyday tasks. Sitting and getting out of a chair, sitting and standing up from the toilet, getting in and out of our car, right? Anytime that we are making that squatting motion, getting in and out of your car, you're also adding a lateral movement in. And while this is really, really common, there are some ways that we can help this pain in most cases. Now, as always consult with your doctor, your nurse practitioner, your physical therapist, any medical practitioner. This is not meant to be individualized medical advice or any medical advice at all. So, some tips that I have for you are, one, to start strength training. If we can make our muscles, our joints, our tendons stronger, we are very likely to help decrease the discomfort in our joints when we are moving. Now, when we start strength training, especially when we are doing the squat pattern, that movement pattern, it can be really uncomfortable, especially if we already have discomfort in our knees, right? And our nervous system is going to be kind of on high alert, like, what are you doing? This is uncomfortable. Why are you now making me do this for more reps, more times, more, maybe even holding a weight? So the first step I have for you is to try to relax your nervous system by taking some deep calming breaths before you are going to do any sort of activity that could feel uncomfortable. Trying to bring and relax through our whole body using just some deep breaths in, holding them at the top, letting it out slowly, holding at the bottom. It's called a box breath. And that can be really useful to incorporate into your warm-up before you start any sort of training. Now, what about when you start squatting? When you start your strength training journey, if squats bother your knees, you are very often going to hear, and this is very, very old advice or recommendations on your foot placement and form. And you're going to hear things like, make sure you break below parallel, make sure your toes are forward and your knees are forward. When you are getting started, you do not need to worry about those things. You may not ever need to worry about those things, because first of all, having your feet totally forward and your knees totally forward may not be the best squatting position for you and your body, especially if you have wider hips. Okay, so one of the first things I like to look at with folks that I'm working with is our foot and toe position and our leg position. So it might take you a little bit to find what footing feels most comfortable for you. So coming a little bit wider than hip width or just at hip width, and then try just taking your toes out just a little bit. So instead of being perfectly up at 12, we might be at 11 and 1. See how that feels when you start coming down into the squatting position. And then you might find that you need a little bit wider of a stance, or your toes to even come out closer to 2 and 10. That's a clock. And see how that feels as you are then able to make more room for your body to actually move through that range of motion. This brings us to range of motion. When you start squatting, if you are feeling pain in your knees, it is not necessarily necessary that you're getting all the way down, breaking past parallel. Sometimes we call this like ass to grass, where your tailbone is coming all the way down to the floor. Start by putting a bench or a chair under your bottom. Find that foot position that seems to feel the most comfortable for you in your knees. Drop it down, tap that bench, press through the floor and stand up. Work your way to a deeper range of motion as you get stronger and as that pain in your knees maybe starts to dissipate as all the muscles get stronger, okay? And that's gonna help you feel more stable as well. So set your foot position so it's most comfortable for you and your body to hit into that squat. Decrease your range of motion can be very, very useful for you, especially when you get started. Play around with how that feels. Next piece of advice I have is to pay attention to how your torso is angled. So you'll oftentimes hear a lot about keeping your chest proud and elevated and bringing your tailbone straight down to the floor. And you'll see that as I do that, my knees are coming forward. Sometimes they come over my toes. There is nothing wrong with your knees coming over your toes. I'm gonna say that right now. That's a very natural movement. Think about when you're coming down the stairs, you're walking down a hill, your knees are coming over your toes. But if this is causing discomfort in your knees while you're starting to build quad strength, try instead of bringing your tailbone directly down to the floor, hinging it back, not quite like a deadlift, but just ever so slightly to try to keep those shins more parallel. So if I have the box behind me, instead of coming down like this, see how my knees come more forward? I have more of an angled position at my ankles. Try sitting back and down into that squat position to try to keep your shins a little bit more perpendicular with the floor. Keep your knees back a little bit. Other piece of advice I have for you, I think this is number 4, is to pay attention to where your knees are going when you are squatting. One of the best ways to do this is to actually film yourself or have a coach watch you as you squat. We want to think about, more importantly than our toes going over our knees or staying over our ankles, is we want our knees to be tracking between our big toe, so this like second toe to our big toe here. So what that means is as we're squatting, we want to make sure we're not rolling up on the sides of our feet. This happens as a compensation sometimes. That's going to cause extra stress on our joints that we don't need. Sometimes we bow inwards as we squat down, and this is even more subtle. So see, my knees are inside my toe line. We want to just bring them back out. So really think about having the 4 corners of your feet pressed through the floor. So I'm just lifting my toes up in a little bit of an exaggeration here so you can see that. So we don't want our weight completely back on our heels. We don't want to be up on the balls of our feet. We want to be nice and tight over those 4 corners of our feet. 1, 2, 3, 4, okay? Something else that you can do to help you feel this is to add a resistance band. Doesn't have to be anything super fancy. Putting this band just above your knees is gonna help you just gain a little bit of input, a little proprioceptive input to press those knees out a little bit. So if you find yourself kind of bowing your knees inward when you are squatting, try adding that band just above your knees, and it doesn't have to be anything super heavy. In fact, we probably don't want it to be extra heavy because the purpose is just to tell our brain, press out a little, so that we are activating our glute medius and our glute maximus to just press out ever so slightly to give us that little bit of input to keep our knees tracking over that second toe. So if you are starting your strength training journey, or even if you are in the middle of it and you're finding that squatting is really bothering your knees, try these 4 tips and see how they feel for you. So decreasing your range of motion, adjusting your foot and your leg position, paying attention to where your knees are tracking, adding a resistance band if you need it for a little bit of sensory input, and adjusting your hip angle as you travel downwards. Instead of traveling straight down so that your knees are coming over your toes or almost over your toes, try just pushing your hips back a little bit so that your shins are more vertical. Hopefully this is helpful. If it was, please make sure you subscribe to our channel so you never miss a new video. Make sure you jump on our Straight Up Strong newsletter. We get Strong Sunday newsletter. You get updates and little pieces of mine and Coach Tina's story that you may not get to hear on any other channel. And we hope to have a great conversation with you soon. Take care.